Uh, Lydia Huston, so grateful to have you here with us today. This mic is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. I was going to continue reading from John Mundy's excellent book, Living A Course in Miracles, The Essential Guide to the Classic Text. But today I wanted to do something a little different. We were snowed in. It happened Thursday night. A ton of snow fell on us, and it was not just snow, but sometime during the night, it rained and then it froze and then it snowed again. So it was treacherous to try to drive. And I was not able to get over to my mom's for 2 days. And so and during those 2 days, I was, technically snowed in. And I thought, wow, I need to be in the house right now. And I got to do something that I never get to do because I don't have any time ever to sit down and watch a movie with Jim. We have one day a week, and that's Sunday. And from 3 to 4, I can sit down and watch something with him. But that's not long enough to watch an entire film. So we end up chopping up films and watching them over the course of a month or 2 weeks or something. So I actually treated myself to watching a movie on my computer here. And what I saw was The Killers of the Flower Moon, which I read the book and I was really excited, to see if the movie, which I do love Martin Scorsese. And I wanted to see if the film was true to the book. They did change a few things. I but I just wanted to say that what I found after watching Killers of the Flower Moon is that the course helped me see it in a different way. Um, and I just want to discuss that with some minority members of our community who might feel marginalized and not treated well by society. I want to say that doing the course is difficult when you come from the perspective of the other in society. And I felt strongly when I was reading the book. I am not a descendant of the Osage Nation. Actually, I'm one of the Choctaws in my background. So I did not have a direct connection with this story, but I did feel that these people were very mistreated. Now, the Course tells us beware of the temptation to perceive yourself as unfairly treated. Because in that view, you are seeking to secure an innocence that is yours and yours alone. And it excludes your brothers. I'm paraphrasing, forgive me. And I know that a lot of the people who study the course, who are minorities, will feel, well, we were mistreated. That's just a fact. And it's a fact within the dream. But remember, this is a dream and it is not real. So and that is not to say that you shouldn't protest, that you shouldn't do concrete things to eradicate the situation. By that, I mean uh, what Martin Luther King did helped generations of African Americans. And what he did was important in the illusion. We definitely benefited from his efforts and his sacrifice. So what I want to say is, and I'm speaking very personally to minorities, remember that you're dreaming. When you become depressed, when you feel defeated, when you feel that you cannot take another insult, remember that you are dreaming. And your brothers who seem to be mistreating you are playing their roles, their assigned roles in this. And I know it's hard to come from that perspective, but if you really, really, really want to do the course and you want to gain the benefits of it, you have to adopt this mentality. You have to look at things differently. And you won't always be able to look at things differently. That's why you have to turn to the Holy Spirit and ask for help. Ask for help to see things differently. And this applies to everything that seems to upset you, not just racially motivated instances of unfair treatment, but everything that seems to upset you. Ask the Holy Spirit to see things differently, and you will be amazed. You won't be able to go forward with the same anger, the same sense of outrage. The Holy Spirit gives you peace. And when you ask to see things differently, those are the benefits. It's not about enlightenment, it's about happiness. And if you can turn to the Holy Spirit in instances where you feel unfairly treated, you will see that your sense of defeat, humiliation, whatever, will be diffused, and then it will disappear. But you have to become accustomed to turning to the Holy Spirit throughout your day, even in the smallest instances. Just turn to the Holy Spirit, and you will see that everything is put into perspective. And by perspective, I do mean if you feel, for instance, that you've been humiliated, unfairly treated, and you're not a hostile person, but you are angry, and that anger is turned inward. There is no one to talk to. There is no way to get justice. That's difficult. That is extremely difficult. And your anger, your humiliation is all turned inward. That's the time to turn to the Holy Spirit. And you don't have to go to a church, don't have to go to a sanctuary. All you have to do is become quiet and go within and ask, how can I see things differently? This seems to be happening to me, and it's almost unbearable. How can I see things differently? And the Holy Spirit will give you the answer in some form that you can understand and relate to. And it could be in the form of someone that you love saying some words of comfort that really resonate with you. It could be your own mind telling you, well, this is not what you're thinking. But reminding yourself that you are dreaming and that the dream is trying to trick you into thinking that you've separated from God and you are out here on your own, doing this all alone. And that's not even remotely true. You are not alone. You are not doing this on your own. Feeling separated from God actually makes you think that the whole world depends on what you do. And the Course tells us in the illusion, it doesn't matter what we do. I know that sounds like blasphemy, but it's true. In the illusion, it doesn't matter what we do because we're not really here. We think we're here. We think we're individuals with lives and skin colors and socioeconomic categories, but we're not. This is a collective delusion, and we've bought into it. Otherwise, we wouldn't think we're here. So, turning to the Holy Spirit is the best thing you can do for yourself. And it doesn't mean you have to get on your knees and clasp your hands together and pray. All you have to do is turn inward from moment to moment, whenever you need to, and say, I want to see things differently. And there you have it. So, that being said, it was a really great movie. I like the part at the end where Martin Scorsese comes out and he reads the obituary of Molly Burkhart, and it's really touching. And I love to be so engrossed in a film, and I really was. I was watching and just I couldn't believe it. It was just so engrossing, and I highly recommend it. So that being said, let's get back to living A Course in Miracles, the essential guide to the classic text. So we are beginning with chapter 12. Why is this happening to me? Trial, accidents, coincidence, and destiny. Whatever aspect of the soul we neglect becomes a source of suffering. Thomas More. God, how could you do this to me? The only survivor of a shipwreck, washed up on a small, uninhabited island. He prayed feverishly for God to rescue him. For days, he scanned the horizon, but he saw nothing. With a piece of broken glass and a bit of dried tinder, he was finally able to start a fire. And he eventually managed to build a little hut to protect him from the elements and to store a few possessions. One day, while he was scavenging for food, some embers caught the hut on fire, and he arrived at his home to find his little hut in flames, with smoke rolling up to the sky. The worst possible thing had happened. Everything he had was lost. He was stunned with disbelief, grief, and anger. He cried out, God, how could you do this to me? The next day, he was awakened by the sound of a boat approaching the island. How did you know I was here? Asked the weary man. We saw your smoke signal, came the reply. The problems people bring me sometimes find expression in terms of, why is this happening? As though some cosmic force was behind everything. Emperor philosopher Marcus Aurelius said, all things happen as they should. That is, after all, the way they happen. In everything, even little things, things which seem insignificant or do not make sense at the time, there is a plan. The script is written. Workbook lesson 158. Our passage through space and time is not an accident. It is not without design. A young man told me about an experience he had while he was doing a job he hated. He stopped the van he was driving and started banging his head on the steering wheel, saying, "Why is this happening to me?" And then he heard, "To prepare you for the rest of your life." Another man told me of being a passenger in a car which was heading directly into a collision with the side of a truck. And he heard, "Don't worry, this has to happen. Everything will be okay." What is interesting about this second passage is the second sentence. This has to happen. Some of your greatest advances you have judged as failures, and some of your deepest retreats you have evaluated as success. A Course in Miracles. We've all had the experience of having something happen and then saying, "I would never have chosen this." When I lost a country inn I owned in 1989, left the Methodist ministry, and lost nearly everything I had, financially speaking, I asked, why is this happening? I later realized that was what had to happen. I had to go through this crash and burn, and I had to step away from the Methodist ministry in order to gain perspective. I had chosen this experience, and it was necessary to go through this purification to experience life at a deeper level. In 2001, dealing with cancer and the possibility of death enabled another, even deeper letting go. The only way ahead was to accept the very real possibility of imminent mortality, which again forced me into the moment. Living in the moment always miraculously brings everything to life. Being responsible, I see my past was the only one that could be. I could not have done it differently. And so from guilt, I am set free. No nostalgia, no remorse. There really was no other course. The past as well held, no mistakes. Given all the possible factors of heredity, environment, economics, and faith, each of us walks the face of this earth as best we can, and God never condemns our stumbling along the way. Forgiveness of ourselves lies in the acceptance of the fact that we could not have a different past. It was what it was, and the best thing we can do is to release it for correction and leave it in the past. The time will be as right as is the answer, and this is true for everything that happens now or in the future. The past as well held no mistakes. A Course in Miracles, Manual for Teachers. The further we are along the path, the more we can look back and see it was perfect for what we needed to learn. The presence of our parents, or the lack thereof, was precisely what was needed for our spiritual development. The place we grew up in was the right place. What I'm going through at the moment is a part of my life's lessons. I'm laying in a hospital bed. I'm facing bankruptcy. My wife is leaving me. I have cancer. Whatever it is, there is great strength in loving what is. Your passage through time and space is not at random. You cannot but be in the right place at the right time. Such is the strength of God. Such are his gifts. A Course in Miracles, Workbook Lesson 42. When everything is falling apart, something else is trying to be born, and accepting responsibility for what is happening helps me deal with it. We are not driven by external, purposeless events. Everything is a part of our spiritual journey. After all, it is what we are experiencing. No accidents are possible in the universe as God created it, and every accident is a lesson. There is a French proverb which says that we often meet our destiny on the road we took to avoid it. We are constantly learning, and the older we get, the more we know that life itself is something which goes far beyond the mundane, the body, and everydayness. Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. Danish theologian Soren Kierkegaard. Assuming responsibility. A study done in the late 1990s on people who had lived to the age of 100 tried to determine if there were any psychological conditions which had enabled them to live so long, outside of the obvious physical conditions which prevailed. Anyone who has lived to the age of 100 has seen a lot and has inevitably been through a lot of pain and distress. The thing they found that all of them had in common was the ability to successfully handle stress. My barn having burned to the ground, I can now see the moon. Japanese haiku. The Chinese symbol for crises has a dual meaning, danger and opportunity. The Japanese word for thank you is arigato, which means hardship exists. According to the wisdom of the East, things turn into their opposite. Out of hardship, good fortune will follow. There is a time for expanding and a time for contraction. One provokes the other, and one calls for the return of the other. Never are we nearer the light than when darkness is deepest. Indian spiritual teacher Swami Vivekananda. The space in which we need to let go is really very clear to us if we want to admit it. Letting go is sometimes the only solution and the best solution. It is not my guilt which makes me suffer. It's holding on to guilt which give me pain. Pain is the only sacrifice the Holy Spirit asks. A Course in Miracles. As the deaf/blind American author Helen Keller expressed it, although the world is very full of suffering, it is also very full of the overcoming of it. When we hear of someone who has gone through some difficulty or has perhaps been born with a disability and has gone ahead to live in the fullest despite that difficulty, we cannot help but be impressed with the power of the mind. Helen Keller was left blind and deaf at 19 months of age as a result of scarlet fever. Despite her severe disability, with the aid of her teacher, Anne Sullivan, Helen graduated from Radcliffe, and she wrote 12 books. The title of her autobiography, Light in Darkness, says it all. I read that, by the way, loved it. Keller once said, "I thank God for my handicaps for through them I have found myself, my work, and my God. Can we say that we are grateful for our handicaps or our hardships? Do we know how much they have helped lead us back home again to God? Trials are but lessons that you failed to learn, presented once again. So where you made a faulty choice before, you now can make a better one, and thus escape all pain that what you chose before has brought to you. In every difficulty, all distress, and each perplexity, Christ calls to you and gently says, my brother, choose again. Shake it off and step up. A farmer owned an old mule that fell into a well. After carefully assessing the situation, the farmer sympathized with the mule, but decided that neither the mule nor the old well were worth the trouble of saving. He called his neighbors together and told them what had happened and enlisted their services to haul dirt to bury the old mule in the well and put him out of his misery. Every time a shovel of dirt landed on his back, the mule would shake it off and step up. This he did, shovel load after shovel load. Shake it off and step up. Shake it off and step up. Shake it off and step up. No matter how painful the shovel loads or distressing the situation seemed, the old mule just kept right on shaking it off and stepping up. It wasn't long before the old mule, battered and exhausted, stepped triumphantly over the edge of the well. Accidents, coincidence, and destiny. No one comes to us by accident. No meeting of any two people is ever unplanned. It does not matter if the encounter lasts 1 second or a lifetime. The simplest level of teaching appears to be quite superficial. It consists of what seem to be very casual encounters. A chance meeting of two apparent strangers in an elevator. A child who is not looking where he is going, running into an adult by chance. Two students happening to walk home together. These are not chance encounters. Each of them has the potential for becoming a teaching learning situation. Perhaps the seeming strangers in the elevator will smile to one another. Perhaps the adult will not scold the child for bumping into him. Perhaps the students will become friends. Even at the level of the most casual encounter, it is possible for two people to lose sight of separate interests, if only for a moment. That moment will be enough. Salvation has come. A Course in Miracles, Manual for Teachers. In The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment, I read that, Thaddeus Golas said, enlightenment doesn't care how you get there. One of the characters in the movie, Buckaroo Banzai, says, wherever you go, there you are. I once counseled someone who said her problems were because she lived in New York. Her problems, of course, had nothing to do with the state of the nation. It was all in the state of the mind. We can procrastinate and we can find innumerable excuses for not paying attention. Eventually, we have to face life straight on and deal with what stands in front of us. Eventually, all bills must be paid or forgiven. We cannot make a date with enlightenment. Enlightenment is an accident, and spiritual practice makes us accident prone. Japanese Zen teacher Suzuki Roshi. Austrian psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, MD, PhD, a neurologist, a Holocaust survivor, and author of the best-selling Man's Search for Meaning, said the people who handled the trauma at Auschwitz best were those who somehow knew that even in the horror of this situation, there was some purpose. By the way, I did read that book by Dr. Frankel, and it amazed me. It just really amazed me because he saw some horrific things. And he was one of those people who knew there was a purpose. Couldn't pinpoint it right then, of course, but he knew there was a purpose to this suffering. And like a good Course in Miracles student would, he was just waiting to see how things turned out. He said that he found in Auschwitz two types of people. It did not matter what class or ethnic group they were from. There were still two types: decent and loving, and non-decent and fearful. Those who impeccably pursue their destinies are the happiest people, even though they may choose to remain single, turn down wealth, or be crucified. No step that anyone makes along the road is inadvertent. We've already walked this road, so it is a matter of asking the Holy Spirit to help us remember what we already know. In reality, we are home, quote unquote, heaven, resting in the arms of God. The story has been played through. We have attained entrance to the kingdom of heaven. We are already perfect and whole. We were just dreaming a silly dream. In Maya's illusions house are many mansions. Heaven is reality, not a dream. There is no distress, no sickness, no loss, no bankruptcy, no interpersonal problem, and no death. However extraordinary or mundane, that does not come our way holding a gift in its hand. Everyone has a mission. That mission is to remember what we already know. It's about remembering our true identity, healing our relationships, and joining with our brothers and sisters in crossing the bridge to the real world. Those who find a way to fulfill their destinies tell us time and again that they knew there was something they had to do. Destiny had to be fulfilled, and the best thing was to fulfill it. This chapter offered so much to me. I am very much a believer, and I was, even before I began studying the Course, that there is a bigger picture. There is a destiny for us all. And even the most tragic things will lead us somewhere better, and we'll always get there in the end. I never articulated it that way, but I always had this optimism that this is going to turn out better than it looks right now. Case in point, how I met my husband. He has a larger story to tell than I do, but I was working at a property management company and wondering what I was going to do after that, because it really was a temporary job. And I was also contemplating joining a commune. Yes, I'm one of those hippies. I was contemplating joining the farm. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it is the largest, most successful intentional community in America. It is based in Tennessee, I believe, and if I remember correctly. And I contacted someone there, and I was going to uh, accumulate my days off and go there. And I was in dialogue with a representative there. I was going to stay in the cabin, see how things worked. I was going to see the soybeans harvested. I was really prepared to just go because I I was not um, happy with life in the city, and I always felt that there was a greater purpose in intentional communities, and I read a lot about them, and I was just ready to go. Now, Jim, my husband, was coming from a different perspective. He was not ready to join an intentional community, not in any way, shape, or form. He was, he had just gone through a very devastating, highly publicized divorce. And basically, he lost almost everything except for his girls. So he lost his home, his business, a significant amount of his fortune, and he was looking for a place to rent that would stay in a certain school district so the girls wouldn't have to move schools. And he contacted the company that I worked for. My boss was very busy that day, and I took down all of Jim's information and gave it to her. And it seemed like that was just a busy time of the year because Fran was on the phone all the time with overseas clients, and it seemed like I was dealing with Jim almost exclusively. And he had applied for this very nice home in Beverly Hills, and he was anxious um, to get moved in, to see if he was approved for one thing, but to get moved in and to get the girls settled. Um, and I was the one to relay his messages to my boss, and it just so happens that we had a rapport. We talked endlessly. I noticed he had a great sense of humor, and I looked forward to his phone calls, but I knew that it wouldn't last indefinitely. Once he was approved, he would come in with his realtor, sign the lease. I made certain that the day he came in to sign the lease, that I had washed my hair, I was wearing my best suit, and I even got up a little earlier that morning so that I could go to the coffee shop on Northwestern Highway so that I could get his favorite coffee roast, and the coffee would be ready when he and his realtor arrived. Well, I was really excited to meet him. So excited that I could barely stay in my seat. I was constantly getting up, checking things, dusting. And finally, he and his realtor arrived, and he was taken aback. He had no idea I was a person of color. I mean, I could tell that he was shocked. And I I didn't I didn't feel that we had chemistry because he was very shocked, and it seemed he seemed a little shaken. So he and his realtor went into the conference room and closed the door. And I just did what I usually do, worked, answered phones, took down information, set up showings for houses. And it was later on that I went to lunch. And when I came back, he and his realtor were gone. So I just chalked it up to we didn't have chemistry, and I just went on from there. I didn't linger over the issue because that's just not that's not my personality. So um I went on. I At the time that I was working at that property management company, I was also tutoring French in the evenings, like 3 nights per week. So I was really busy, and um, I just got on with it. After uh, Jim had moved in with his girls in that house in Beverly Hills, uh, I got a call at the office, of course, and it was Jim. And he said that there were chipmunks in the attic, and he wanted to know if the company would call a service to get them out. And I said, yes, of course. I thought we dealt with a company called Critter Control, and I called and set up the service. And then he called about something else, um, and then something else. Then there was a plumbing problem, and this was a really nice house, but there were these problems, and I would set up all the service calls. And finally, there was like a couple months later after the last call, he called and I said, "Oh no, Mr. Houston, what is wrong now?" And he said, "Well, nothing. Actually, uh, I hear that you tutor French after work." And I said, "Yes, I do." And he said that his older daughter was struggling in French, and she had taken an AP course, and he was wondering if I could help. And I said, well, yeah, I'd love to meet her and see what her needs are. So we set up a time on my day off. It was, I remember this so well. It was Columbus Day, and it was also my niece's birthday. And I remember Jim calling the office and asking me if I had any dietary restrictions. At the time, I was just vegetarian, and I told him that. And he said, "Oh, I have a wonderful recipe for marinara that I want you to try. And I'm making the pasta from scratch." I was thinking, I didn't know anyone who ever made pasta from scratch. So I was like, okay. Um, so and I had no idea that this was like a date. But later on, Jim said, yeah, it was definitely a date. And I arrived with some learning aids, age appropriate learning aids, an old textbook, and I met his girls, and we sat down for dinner, and we talked almost exclusively. I mean, the girls were just there, but I never got to tutor the older one. I never, I, I didn't even get to find out like what her class was like, because Jim and I talked and talked and talked and talked. And finally, it was time for me to leave. And uh, I left, and that was it. The next week, I came back to maybe get to know his daughter. And again, we talked and talked and talked. And the next week, I came home and told my mom, Mom, Mr. Huston and I are in love. And that was it. I don't recommend this happens to anyone else, okay? I don't recommend to proceed this way, but that's just the way it happened. And I I have to say that Jim has said to friends and acquaintances that um, that devastating divorce and the bankruptcy were the best things that ever happened to him, because it did lead to us meeting. And if he hadn't lost his house, he never would have been looking for a house to rent. Um, if he hadn't gone through the bankruptcy, he wouldn't have had to, stay in the Birmingham school district. He There are so many things that he is thankful for, and it did lead. And by the way, I did not ever go to the farm, because after I met Jim, it just didn't seem all that important. So I never went to the farm. I don't know how soybeans are harvested. And I never got to stay in the cabin. And I never wanted to ever again after I met my husband. So, out of devastation, the best things can happen. We've been married 22 years, and there have been a lot of ups and downs, but it's it's been an enriching experience, very much so. And I have to say that my mom just recently told me that after my accident, I had a serious car accident when I was almost 4. And basically, it was just so devastating. I was in the hospital for months, afterwards in a body cast. My mom, that was a very, very traumatic time for her. Um, she was beginning a new job the day I had the accident. Uh, so many things happened one after the other, and all because of the accident. And my mom said, still, that time with me in the hospital and then at home recuperating, uh, she she definitely knows that it was a time that we got to spend a lot of precious moments together. She would read to me. Um, she sometimes did my fingernails. We had word games because I had brain damage after the accident, and I didn't remember hardly anything, and my syntax was terrible. Um, so we had little word games, and I tell you, I am really very, very close to my mom. And I think that I don't remember a lot of that time because my memory is fuzzy, but mom said that we did so much together, and she cherishes those times. And I even have a photograph in my mind of we had a small apartment, and there was this huge bed in the middle of the living room where I was laid up for months in a body cast. And I just remember my mom polishing my nails and me blowing on them. And and I remember thinking, Wow, this is great. And not even minding that I was in a body cast and unable to move my limbs or scratch my leg or anything. Um, it was a wonderful time. And as it happens, it was a time that my sister gave me a lot of her attention. She taught me to read before I was even in kindergarten because she had all of this knowledge. My sister is like so brilliant, and she taught me to read, even though she had no training in teaching anyone how to read. She just felt her way around and taught me what she thought I should know. And God, I can't even stop thanking her to this day because reading is my greatest pleasure. That and eating, of course. But yes, reading is my greatest pleasure. And it's all because Vita taught me how to read. And I know I could have gone to school and learned how to read later on, but because of Vita, I did skip a grade, and I'm really thankful for that too. So it is 3:54, and I am going to say goodbye for now and see you again next week. And I'm going to head over to my mom's so I can get back in time to make dinner. Um, Thank you all. And it was a pleasure being with you today. Um, Bye for now.
Thank you so much, Lydia Houston. Such a pleasure to have you here. And I love hearing your stories. And it just is so sweet to me how, I mean, the things that happen to us make us the people that we are. And that's how we learn to have compassion and to be loving. And, you know, in our groups, we have several groups. In our groups, we have, I think, three or four people who have been run over by cars, girls who have been hit by cars and have, I mean, me, I was hit by a car. I mean, several of us have been hit by cars, and it's just for, you know, a group of like, you know, 15 people to have three of them that were hit by cars, maybe four. It just and he got broken legs and all that kind of stuff. It's like, you know, what are the odds? I mean, it's just statistically not even likely, you know, and you know, you with your accident when you were little, and it just is you know, those things happen to us for a reason. And you know, some of our great teachers, I don't know if you know of Mar Baba. He was a great teacher in the 50s and 60s and thereabouts. He was in a really, I think, a really bad car accident and was, you know, kind of in a wheelchair, I think, for some portion of his life. And also Chogyam Trungpa, who is what my original teacher, he was in a terrible accident in London. Um, and I mean,
God.
it's like, I mean, the cars have done some pretty crazy things to people, but
Oh, yeah.
but you know, you got to say, what's the purpose of this? What is the purpose of this? And you know, it's because, you know, you needed to be somewhere, you needed to be sitting still for a long period of time so you could learn to be still for a long period of time. Because I know when I was laid up, I was 17 years old. So I was, you know, a very
Oh,
active teenager, and I was like laid up for months.
oh my God. Lynn,
Yeah.
that's worse than being four. I mean, you already knew so much about life and um, what you like to do. And I mean, your limbs, you didn't have any restrictions. That must have been awful.
Yeah, you know, but it wasn't because I learned how to get around and do the things I wanted to do. So I
Did
only
you?
broke one leg. Oh, I only broke one leg. So that was a good thing. But
But a
uh,
car ran you over.
yeah, yeah. hit me, I flew up through the air. We all have the same question, same story. Like it hit me, I flew up in the air, I landed, whacked my head, I had gravel in my face.
Oh
Just
my, oh my God.
it just is, I mean, really, really, so how can that be? It's like we're the same person and, having all this stuff. Anyway, thank you.
I mean,
Uh,
that's just incredible to me. Oh my God.
I know it's just so like weird, but I mean, when I started hearing other people's stories, I'm like, what? You got hit by a car too? What? You got hit by a car too? How can this be? This is this is just insanity. But that's the world we made. So
Uh-huh, it is, and it's part of the script.
yeah.
I I think about like how devastating that is to the person it happens to, and uh just it's a part of the script, and it was meant to move you forward to from point A to point B, and point B was you were meant to learn something. By the way, I had a fear of cars that was not actuated, but I didn't learn to drive until I was in my late 20s.
Yeah, I didn't get a driver's license till I was in my 30s.
Goodness,
I did not
I was
drive.
great.
Yeah, it just you could not get me to drive a car, but I finally did, and I drove all over the place. So just crazy, But I never ran over anybody. That's
I know. Yeah, we can say that. I mean,
I shouldn't say maybe you have, and I don't know. No, I'm kidding.
no, no, but I can say that. I've never run over anyone. No.
That's hilarious. All right, my dear, I'm gonna